My husband James said, "I'm sorry. I don't want this anymore. It's over." Then I said something that would shock him, shock myself, and ultimately reveal truths about our marriage that neither of us had been willing to face. This is a story of how one devastating sentence led to the most honest conversation we had ever had, and how it seemed like an ending actually became a new beginning that saved us both. We were sitting in our living room on a Tuesday evening when my husband James dropped his bomb on our 19-year marriage. The kids were at their activities, and we were supposedly going to have a quiet dinner together. Instead, James sat down across from me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of determination and sadness, and delivered those words that every spouse dreads hearing. "I'm sorry. I don't want this anymore. It's over." My first instinct was to cry, to beg, to ask what I had done wrong. But something stopped me. Maybe it was a finality in his tone. Maybe it was the exhaustion I felt from years of walking on eggshells. Maybe it was the small voice in my head that whispered I deserved better than someone who would give up on us so abruptly. Whatever it was, instead of falling apart, I looked my husband James directly in the eyes and said something completely unexpected. Then I said with a calmness that surprised even me, "Okay, if that is what you truly want, then we should discuss the practical details of separating. But first, I need you to answer one question honestly. Do you actually not want this marriage anymore? Or do you not want a version of this marriage that we have been living? Because those are two very different things, James." My husband James looked stunned. He had clearly expected tears, pleading, or anger. What he got instead was a direct question that cut through to the heart of the matter. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could see him processing what I had asked, and I could see the moment when he realized he did not have a simple answer. When James said he did not want this anymore and it was over, he had expected me to simply accept his declaration. Instead, I was making him think. The silence stretched between us for what felt like forever. Then I said, continuing before he could formulate a response, "Because I have been unhappy too, James. I have been unhappy for years. But I never considered just declaring it over and walking away, because I made a commitment to you, to us, to our family. So before we throw away 19 years, I need to know, have you actually tried to fix what is broken, or are you just giving up?" My husband James finally found his voice. "I have tried," he said defensively. "I have tried to be patient with you. Try to understand why you are always tired or stressed or not interested in me anymore. I have tried to keep this marriage going, but I am exhausted from trying." His words were filled with frustration and what seemed like genuine pain. But I heard something else too, blame. When James said he did not want this anymore, he was essentially saying the failure of our marriage was my fault. Then I said, and my voice remained remarkably steady, "You have tried to be patient with me? James, do you hear yourself? You are describing our marriage as something you have been enduring rather than participating in. When was the last time you asked me why I am always tired? When was the last time you helped without being asked so that I might have energy left at the end of the day? When was the last time you showed interest in my life, my thoughts, my feelings beyond how they affect you?" The look on my husband James's face shifted from defensive to uncertain. I continued before he could interrupt. Then I said, "You say you have tried, but trying a marriage is not about patience, like you are waiting for me to become what you want me to be. Trying means actively working to understand your partner, to share responsibilities, to build a life together rather than parallel lives that happen to share the same house. So I will ask again, have you tried to fix our marriage, or have you just been waiting for me to fix myself?" My husband James sat back in his chair, and I could see him truly thinking about what I was saying for perhaps the first time. When he said he did not want this anymore and it was over, he had rehearsed those words, prepared to deliver them, and then leave to start whatever new life he had imagined for himself. But my response had derailed his script. He was being forced to actually examine our marriage rather than just end it. Then I said, because I was not finished yet, "Here's what I think has happened, James. We have both been unhappy. We have both felt disconnected and unappreciated. We have both been going through the motions rather than actually being present in our marriage. But instead of talking about it honestly, instead of doing the hard work of figuring out how to reconnect, you decided it was easier to just say it is over and blame me for why you are unhappy. And I let you, for about 30 seconds before I realized that I deserved better than that. My husband James's eyes were now glistening with what might have been tears. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted quietly. "I feel like we have drifted so far apart that I don't even know who you are anymore, and I don't think you know who I am either. When I said I don't want this anymore, I meant I don't want to keep living like roommates who occasionally argue. I want more than this, but I don't know how to get there." This admission was more honest than anything my husband James had said in years. For the first time, he was not blaming or declaring, but actually expressing his feelings vulnerably. Then I said, softening my tone slightly, "I understand that feeling, James, because I feel it too. But running away is not the answer. If you leave now, you will just take these same problems into your next relationship. You will find someone new and exciting, and for a while it will feel better, but eventually you will drift apart from them too, because you have not learned how to maintain intimacy and connection over time." My husband James looked at me with something like hope mixed with skepticism. "Do you really think we can fix this? After all this time of being disconnected?" His question was genuine, and I appreciated that he was at least willing to consider alternatives to his declaration that it was over. When James said he did not want this anymore, he had not anticipated being challenged to think deeper about what he actually wanted. Then I said, choosing my words carefully, "I think we can fix this if we are both willing to be completely honest, to do the hard work, and to actually show up for each other instead of just coexisting. But James, that means you cannot check out the first time it gets difficult. It means going to counseling. It means having uncomfortable conversations. It means examining your own contribution to our problems instead of just pointing at mine. Are you willing to do that, or do you still want to walk away?" The question hung in the air between us. My husband James looked down at his hands, and I could see him wrestling with the decision. Part of me was preparing for him to stand up and leave, to insist that yes, it really was over and he was done. But another part of me felt strangely calm. If James chose to leave, I would survive. I had just proven to myself that I was strong enough to speak my truth and set boundaries. I was not going to beg him to stay. Either he would choose our marriage, or he would not. After what seemed like forever, my husband James looked up at me and said, "I am willing to try, really try, not just wait for things to magically get better. You are right that I have been blaming you instead of looking at myself. You are right that I have not been showing up as a real partner. And you are right that if I leave now, I will just repeat these same patterns somewhere else." His voice cracked slightly as he continued, "I don't actually want to lose you or our family. I just did not know how to say that I was struggling and needed things to change." Then I said, and I felt tears forming in my own eyes for the first time since this conversation began, "I have been struggling too, James. I have felt so alone in this marriage, like I was carrying everything on my own. I have felt unseen and unappreciated. When you said you did not want this anymore and it was over, my first reaction was hurt. But my second reaction was relief, because at least we were finally being honest about how bad things had gotten. We cannot fix problems we pretend do not exist." My husband James nodded, and a tear actually rolled down his cheek. "I am sorry," he said, and this time his apology sounded different than when he said it while declaring the marriage over. This apology was genuine, vulnerable, and directed at actual harm he had caused rather than just a preamble to abandonment. "I am sorry for checking out. I am sorry for blaming you. I am sorry for being willing to give up without really fighting for us. What you said tonight about me just waiting for you to change instead of working to change myself, that really hit home." Then I said, reaching across the space between us to take his hand, "I am sorry too. I am sorry for letting us drift apart without speaking up sooner. I am sorry for sometimes treating you like another chore on my endless to-do list instead of my partner. I am sorry for not telling you how I was feeling until you were so desperate that you thought leaving was the only option. We have both contributed to getting to this point, James." What followed over the next several hours was the most honest conversation my husband James and I had shared in probably a decade. We talked about how we had both changed over the years and had not communicated those changes to each other. We talked about resentments we had been harboring, needs that were not being met, and fears we had about our marriage. When James said he did not want this anymore, and declare it was over. He had inadvertently opened a door to real communication that we had kept closed for too long. My husband James admitted that he felt like he had lost himself in being a husband and father, that he did not know who he was any more outside of those roles. He said he had been fantasizing about starting over somewhere else as a way to rediscover himself. But my questions had made him realize that geographical or relational changes would not solve his identity crisis. He needed to do internal work to figure out who he was and what he wanted from life. Then I said, sharing my own struggles, I have lost myself too, James. I became so focused on taking care of everyone else that I forgot to take care of myself. I stopped having hobbies, stopped seeing friends, stopped doing anything that was just for me, and then I resented everyone for it, even though it was ultimately my choice. I thought being a good wife and mother meant sacrificing everything, but all it did was make me exhausted and bitter. The realizations kept coming as my husband James and I continued talking. We talked about how we had stopped dating each other, stopped having fun together, stopped being curious about each other's inner lives. We had become business partners running the household rather than romantic partners building a life together. When James said he did not want this anymore, he was right that what we had was not working. But ending the marriage was not the only solution to that problem. Then I said, as we moved into discussing concrete steps forward, we need to start counseling immediately, James. Tomorrow I will find a marriage therapist and make an appointment. We need professional help to navigate this because we have clearly been unable to fix it on our own. Are you committed to showing up to therapy and doing the work it requires? My husband James agreed without hesitation, seeming almost relieved that I was taking charge of finding solutions. Over the following weeks and months, my husband James and I did the difficult work of rebuilding our marriage from the ground up. The therapist helped us identify patterns of communication and behavior that had been damaging our relationship. We learned how to express needs and feelings without blaming. We learned how to really listen to each other instead of just waiting for our turn to talk. When James said he did not want this anymore and it was over, neither of us could predict that his declaration would lead to the strongest and healthiest version of our marriage. Then I said during one particularly breakthrough therapy session, I realize now that when you said you did not want this anymore, you were trying to express something important, but you did not have the words for it. You were not actually rejecting me or our marriage. You were rejecting the dysfunctional patterns we had fallen into. I am so glad I asked you to clarify what you actually meant instead of just accepting your words at face value. My husband James agreed and added his own insight. When you challenged me that night, instead of falling apart like I expected, it forced me to really think about what I was doing. I realized I was taking the coward's way out by just declaring it over rather than being brave enough to admit I was struggling and needed help. Your strength in that moment literally saved our marriage because it made me face the truth. The transformation in our relationship has been profound. My husband James now actively participates in household management rather than seeing it as my responsibility. We schedule regular date nights where we focus on connecting as a couple rather than just discussing logistics. We each make time for individual interests and friendships, recognizing that we need to be whole people separately in order to be good partners together. When James said he did not want this anymore, he had no idea that crisis would lead to genuine growth. Then I said, reflecting on our journey during our 20th anniversary celebration, that terrible night when you said it was over turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to us. It forced us to finally be honest about our problems instead of ignoring them. It made us both take responsibility for our contributions to those problems. And it showed us that we were both willing to fight for our marriage when it really mattered. My husband James raised his glass in agreement. Here is to the worst night that led to the best outcome. I am sorry for almost throwing away the most important relationship in my life. And I am grateful that you were strong enough and wise enough to see past my panic to what we could become if we actually tried. His words were sincere, and I could see in his eyes that he truly meant them. Our children have benefited enormously from the changes in our marriage. They now see parents who genuinely like each other and enjoy spending time together. They see healthy communication and conflict resolution model for them. Our daughter recently told me she is glad we worked through our problems instead of divorcing, because it taught her that relationships require ongoing effort and that difficulties can be overcome with commitment and communication. Then I said, when speaking at marriage retreat we were invited to share our story at, the most important thing I learned from the night my husband said he did not want this anymore is that you cannot take declarations at face value. You have to ask deeper questions. What is really being said? What needs are not being met? What fears are being expressed? If I had just accepted James's words and started packing, we would have missed the opportunity to save and strengthen our marriage. My husband, James, added his perspective to the group, and what I learned is that running away is never the solution. I thought ending my marriage would end my unhappiness, but my wife made me realize I would just be taking my problems with me. Doing the hard work to fix what was broken, both in our relationship and in myself, was so much more valuable than starting over would have been. The other couples at the retreat thanked us for our honesty. Several people approached us privately afterward to share that they were facing similar crises in their marriages. One woman told me that her husband had recently said almost the exact same words to her that James had said to me. She asked me what advice I would give her. Then I said, sharing what I had learned, ask him what he really means. Challenge him to look deeper. Do not let him escape into the easy narrative that you are the problem or the marriage is the problem. Make him examine his own role and his own issues. And then, if he is willing to truly work on things, support that work completely. The experience of almost losing my marriage has made me appreciate it so much more. My husband, James, and I do not take each other for granted anymore. We express appreciation regularly. We check in with each other about how we are feeling and what we need. We have learned that maintaining a strong marriage requires ongoing attention and effort, not just the assumption that love alone will carry you through. When James said he did not want this anymore, he was right that something needed to change. We just needed to change ourselves and our approach rather than ending the relationship. Then I said, during a recent conversation with my sister, who was going through her own marital difficulties, the night James said it was over was actually the beginning of our real marriage. Everything before that was us playing roles and meeting expectations without truly connecting. The crisis forced us to strip away the pretense and build something genuine. It was terrifying and painful, but ultimately it was exactly what we needed. My husband, James, has become a vocal advocate for men doing emotional work in their relationships. He talks openly with other men about how he almost lost his family because he was unwilling to be vulnerable and examine his own issues. When James said he did not want this anymore and declared it over, he was at rock bottom in terms of emotional health. The work he has done since then to understand himself better and communicate more effectively has transformed him as a person. Then I said, recognizing my own growth, I also learned that I cannot sacrifice myself for others and then resent them for it. I have to take care of myself, pursue my own interests, and maintain my own identity. Being a good wife and mother does not mean disappearing as a person. In fact, I am a better wife and mother now that I have rediscovered who I am as an individual. The balance we have found between togetherness and individuality has been key to our renewed marriage. My husband, James, pursues hobbies that I have no interest in, and I do the same. We support each other's individual growth while also making time for shared experiences and connection. We have learned that you can be deeply committed to someone while still maintaining your own separate identity. When James said he did not want this anymore, part of what he was expressing was feeling suffocated by a relationship that had become all-consuming. Our therapist helped us understand that the crisis we faced is actually quite common. Many long-term marriages reach a point where partners feel disconnected and consider ending the relationship. The difference between couples who survive these crises and those who do not often comes down to whether they're willing to be honest, do the work, and truly change rather than just talking about change. Then I said, during our final therapy session, after 2 years of weekly counseling, I am grateful for every difficult moment we have worked through. When James said he did not want this anymore, and it seemed like everything was ending, I could not have imagined we would end up here, stronger and happier than we have ever been. The work was hard, but it was absolutely worth it. My husband James squeezed my hand and added, that night when I said those words, I thought I was ending something, but you refused to let me give up that easily. You challenged me to look deeper and be honest. And because you did that, we were able to save our marriage and build something even better. I will always be grateful that you had the courage and wisdom to see past my panic to what we could become. The story of what happened when my husband James said he did not want this anymore, and it was over has become part of our family narrative. It represents the low point from which we rebuilt. It reminds us never to take our relationship for granted. And it gives us confidence that we can weather any storm together because we have already survived the worst and come out stronger. Then I said, when asked by our children what we would tell our younger selves about marriage, I would tell us that difficulties are not signs that you should give up. They are opportunities to grow and strengthen your relationship if you are willing to face them honestly. When your father said he did not want this anymore, we could have ended our marriage. Instead, we chose to end the dysfunctional patterns and build something healthier. That choice made all the difference. Have you ever faced a moment in a relationship where everything seemed to be ending? How did you respond? Did you accept the situation at face value, or did you dig deeper to understand what was really happening? What advice would you give to someone whose partner has just declared they want out? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story of what happened when my husband James said he did not want this anymore, and it was over resonated with you, please like this video and share it. These stories of relationships that survive crisis can give hope to others facing similar challenges. Sometimes what looks like an ending is actually an opportunity for a new beginning. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories about relationships, personal growth, and finding the courage to fight for what matters. We share honest accounts of struggles and triumphs because real life is complicated, and we all need to know we are not alone in facing difficulties. Thank you for watching my story about the night my marriage almost ended, and how refusing to accept that ending led to something better than I could have imagined. Remember that crisis can be opportunity if you are willing to do the hard work. What seemed like the end of my marriage when James said those words turned out to be the beginning of our best years together. Your story can have a similar transformation if you are willing to fight for it.